Hey, I'm Delise.
And I'm Ginny.
We know that parenting comes in seasons, and even the smallest wins deserve a happy dance.
Join us as we chat with moms in every stage of the parenting journey, fixing our eyes on Jesus each step of the way.
This is Blessings and Motherhood, because we believe that you can hold tissues and confetti at the same time. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Blessings and Motherhood. Today we're going to talk about a slightly controversial topic. We're going to talk about independent learning. Now, I know when we initially say this, and this is kind of a buzzword among moms, independent learning, independent play, we want our children to know how to learn. We want them not to be afraid of new things, and we want them to be able to ask good questions. I think that's something that most people can agree on, but the question is how? How do we go about doing that? Are there some possible pitfalls of that type of a mentality? And so we're going to ask some questions about it today, and we would love to hear your thoughts, and hopefully this will be encouraging to you as you teach and empower your children. So first of all, let's get to the definition. Ginny, how would you define independent learning?
Well, you guys probably know me a little bit by now. I love to just go get a textbook definition, no matter what my thoughts are. So I went kind of online and looked at a few different things, and this is kind of what I came up with. It's independent learning is a process where students take ownership of their education. They're responsible for their own learning. They set goals and make choices to regulate their own learning. And sometimes that can include assessing their progress and their own outcomes. They can do their own research. They can ask questions themselves rather than just relying on a teacher. So that's kind of where that is. I actually have a background in education. I did a capstone paper on self-directed learning. Now, it was for more adults. So I really had to ask myself the question, is independent learning, self-directed learning, is that the same thing? What do I want that to mean for my kids? But that's kind of textbooky-ish. What is an independent learner? What do you think, Delise?
I love that you went to the textbook definition. Honestly, and Ginny already knows this because we just discussed it, but I feel very conflicted about the phraseology here. I think it's a bit of a misnomer, if not an oxymoron. And I know that that sounds maybe a little bit curt, but let me explain why. I don't disagree with wanting my son to be able to do all of the things that you said in that definition. But what was that phrase you used instead? What did you do your capstone on?
Self-directed learning.
Self-directed learning. I think saying self-directed learning is probably a better way to go about it. And I think that because if you say, I'm going to learn this independently and I want my child to be an independent learner, what I picture is unfortunately something I've seen a lot in the homeschool community. I picture people giving their child a book and telling them to go and learn. And that is not the goal of homeschooling, at least not for me. My goal is not for my son to be able to pick up the book and go off by himself. And even a book, he's not by himself. He's with someone else's thoughts in a book.
Right.
And whoever it was who came together to compile those things. So in my mind, he's not even necessarily being independent there. Do I want him to be able to ask good questions? Absolutely. But I love the classical model because it actually teaches you how to use the breadth of knowledge that's available to you, people's testimonies, observations, actually interacting with things, hypotheses. Use all of those things to glean knowledge, but there is no knowledge that you can find within and of yourself. So it's not really, in my mind, independent. And I know I'm splitting hairs there, but you know, I don't love the way that we look at that because I think there can just be so many pitfalls and so many temptations that we could fall into if we're saying that we want our children to be able to learn by themselves.
Yeah, I think there is a key aspect of community there, right? The Bible tells us we need to be in community. We know we are people that want to be with other people. And in some form or capacity, we do need others to help us grow.
Right.
And I think there is a difference in not everybody might not see that because everybody could have their own definition of what it means to be independent.
Right.
Whereas I might see it as I'm going to do everything all by myself. And other people see it as, well, I'm going to guide myself. But yeah, of course, I'm going to invite other people into it with me. So I think there are two different ways we can look at this, and it gets really misconstrued, especially in the education world, where someone's like, I'm just going to let my child be an independent learner. Some people are going to be bug-eyed and be like, what? You're not checking in on them? And then, you can go back and, well, no, of course I'm checking in. So it could mean different things to different people.
Yeah. And that's an important thing to ask yourself, are you checking in? There are a lot of challenges and negative things that the traditional school model affords. But one of the good things it affords is the fact that you're able to learn alongside other people. So you're kind of learning things while other people are learning things, and you're subconsciously picking up on things. So even that is never independent, and you need that in a homeschool setting, whether you have one child, 15 children. That's why we do community. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I will probably get to this because we are going to talk about, are there disadvantages to that? But I think that can be a disadvantage, is that you don't know how to accept people's critique, or you can't accept someone else just having a conversation with you about that if you are not in education with someone to do that. So what do you think, now that we've kind of defined it and talked about it a little bit, what do you think the goal of being, independent learner, self-directed learning, what should the goal ultimately be, and why is it important?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the goal is to know how to start. So again, I just mentioned grammar, dialectic, rhetoric. Sometimes the problem with a new topic, at least for me, but I think this is the case for a lot of people, is that it seems to be so broad, so daunting, that we truly don't know where to start if we don't know how to ask good questions. If we can't do names, naming, attending, etc. If we can't figure out a place to just poke our finger in and get that foundation of knowledge so that we can know what new questions to ask, then everything is just too overwhelming. And I don't want that for my son. I want him to recognize that he doesn't know everything, and to not be afraid of that or to feel like he needs to overcompensate for that, but to be able to walk boldly into the unknown and to keep grasping new things, new concepts. And I do think that some of that has to be self-directed, as in initiated by the learner, so that there's ownership.
Yeah.
So when you say that, I like that, because I want him to take ownership of his own understanding. It can't be, Mom wants me to know this, and so therefore I'm going to learn it. Eventually it has to become, I want to know this for myself. And when he can take that kind of ownership, and he does that already. I mean, most little toddlers know what they want. So we start off doing this kind of thing. But if they can continue to do that as they're learning and growing, then I really believe he'll retain what he learns much more. And that's important for me too. It's not just that I want you to check a box. I want him to have some learning retention, so that what he learns at one time becomes a part of the fabric of who he is, not just a chapter in his life.
Yeah.
What would you say? What's the point?
You made me even think of not teaching our kids, but teaching ourselves.
Yes.
Because I am one, and you guys know this, I did not grow up classically educated. I was not homeschooled. I was a part of a private Christian school, but I really was not taught to ask a lot of questions. And so now as an adult, when I think to go and do my own Bible study time, I don't know where to start sometimes. And I'm finding myself in that spot where you were just talking about wanting our children to know where to start. I'm there. Like when I want to know something, I'm like, how do I do that? I have to ask someone because I don't know where to start. I would love to know where to start it is for myself, because I go and I just looked at my Bible years ago and I was like, how do I do a Bible study? I don't know. I don't want my kids to be there, whether it's their Bible, whether it's science or whatever they're interested in. I want them to kind of know where to start, but to also know who can they go to ask for help as well. And that is part of being independent, I think, too, is to think back on what you've learned, be able to critically think, be able to problem solve for yourself and say, what can I do to help me along this process? Not that you have to do it by yourself, or not even that you have to invite someone in to make sure, you're on the right page. I think that is important as well, but to kind of know where to direct yourself. Again, that self-directed learner is key.
I really believe that the goal is also to train up an adult who
Mm,
can become a self-led, independent, for the sake of the conversation, learner, not a child.
mhm.
And I'm making that distinction because sometimes we put unfair expectations on our children,
Yeah,
especially homeschooled children. As a parent, I just want to give you the skills. I'm trying to equip you with what you need to know. For example, maybe you have flashcards. If I don't teach you how to use the flashcards, you might not be effectively using those.
absolutely.
Using flashcards does not just mean flipping them back and forth. There are a lot of different things you're supposed to do with those flashcards. But I can't hand my kid flashcards and expect him to know that. I
Mhm,
have to talk him through, okay, here are 8 different ways you can use these flashcards to quiz yourself so that you can learn this information. Same thing
mhm,
with mnemonic devices. I mean, there's so many different ways that we can teach our children how to teach themselves to learn, but
mhm,
I'm doing that now with you until you become an adult
mhm.
so that then I can push you off into the world with your skills,
Yeah.
and then you can fly. Your
Uh-huh.
plane, gets messed up and you can fix it because you have those tools. So I do think that it's important for us to make that distinction, because as long as they're a child, they're our responsibility,
Right.
right? So I know that's hard to do, but that's a
Mhm.
stewardship thing.
Yeah, and you made me think too, part of that goal too can be to let our kids know we are there for them.
Yeah.
So the goal is, to have them launch off, like you said. But during that process, I think our goal too should be like to let them know that we're going to be there for them
Mhm.
if they do fall or if they don't know where to go with something. If they get stuck, you can always come to mom. I'm going to be there beside you. Um, but to not give them that crutch when they don't need it. That's kind of
Right.
where I am with my kids right now. They just want me to give them the answer. And it has taken sometimes every bone in my body to don't take a breath, don't give them the answer, ask them the questions to lead them to the
Mhm.
answer. Trying to think of an example real quick. Math, for instance, my Colby is trying to learn how to add double digits, and we've been kind of going through this program with it. And she's like, "Mommy, it's just too hard. I just can't do it." And yes, you can. I will sit here with you as you do it. She'll say, "Well, what do I do now? Which numbers do I add first?" And I just ask her, "What do you think?"
Mhm.
I'm trying to get her to be independent and not rely on me for an answer, but to let her know I'm going to be here with you, I think is important.
Yeah.
And kind of another separate goal in getting our kids to be self-directed.
Because it gives them that confidence. And
Yeah.
that's something else we're trying to give them, the confidence to
Mhm.
learn. As a mom of 4, what are you doing to help your children to learn independently?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really kind of have to think about that for a little bit. One thing I think that I do intentionally is to let them know that it's effort over result.
Hmm.
And when I say that, it kind of goes to that whole grades thing because they hear about their friends that are in public school, A's and B's and C's. And what are those, mommy? Well, did I get an A on that? And I'm like, you don't even know what that is. It does not matter. And I recently just got them a little spelling book to help them with something. And they're like, how many did I get right, mommy? And they get so frustrated if they can't remember how to spell one of the words. And especially one of my kids just really struggles. I'm going to get it wrong, mommy. I know. And I just have to remind her it's not about the end result. I don't care how many you get right. I just care that we're learning and that we're doing our best. That's what God asks of us, right? He always asks, Colossians 3:23, and whatever you do it heartily as to the Lord. You do it with your best effort. And if you get 5 right out of 28, great. Let's go through the ones we missed and let's see why we missed those. What spelling rule did we not apply? And that's the whole point of it. And when I remind her of that, it doesn't always go as planned, but it helps her be like, oh, okay, that's why I'm learning. And so that next time we see the word that we might have missed, she'll be more able to remember that spelling rule instead. So I really try to emphasize that in our home. We also set goals at the beginning of the school year. I think I talked about that in our back to school episode, whereas we set goals and we remind ourselves why we're doing things.
Mhm.
For instance, my kids want a memory master this year. So it's, all right, well, you want a memory master, you're going to have to take control of some of your review work. Mommy can't do it with you all the time. I'm going to do it with you sometimes, but sometimes you just need to get the flip book and be able to review yourself. And they say, well, I don't want to. It's too hard. And I have that goal to remind them, this is your goal for yourself. You can do this.
Mhm.
So to remind them of that. And in our house, we have this phrase we always say, do hard things The trans do hard things, and that we do. We don't want our kids to just say, it's too hard, I'm just not going to do it. Because I'll be honest, I did that a little bit growing up. If it was too hard, I just wanted to quit. Piano's too hard, I don't want to learn anymore. I'm just going to give it up. I don't want to do that. I don't want to show my kids that just because something's hard means we're going to stop it. I'm really nervous about essentials this year. It looks hard. I've heard stories both ways, right? Because anything that's new and unknown can be scary. But we're going to do it, and we're going to do it the best of our abilities. And I know we're in for some hard days figuring out what is a keyword outline. Who knows? Maybe I'll know by the time.
So fun.
Maybe I'll know by the time this episode airs. I'll give you guys a report back on socials. But me and Banks tried it at the end of last year, knowing it was coming up. And boy, did we have some tears. And I did it all wrong, y'all. I was like, no, that's not the word you should choose. This is the word. And I was like, no, what did I do to him, y'all? Mom failed.
Okay.
But it's times like that. It was hard, and we cried, and we both cried. And then we just took a breath. We went away from it, and we came back, and it was great for both of us. So knowing that we're trying to teach them to do hard things, even if that means crying, having emotions, getting it wrong at first, we're going to stick with it. And then I'm trying to resist the urge to step in and do it for them. For instance, we know that this baby is coming. My kids are going to have to do things a little bit more by themselves. For instance, trying to teach them to cook a simple scrambled egg.
Yeah.
And Banks was learning the other day, and I was watching him, and I just wanted to go take it from him. Like, no, you need to flip it. It's going to burn. But I was like, Banks, why don't you flip that? I think it's time to flip it. And he was like, no. And I was like, it might burn, just trying to suggest rather than go in and take it from him. Because if I do that, he's not going to learn how to flip eggs or scramble them the right way. So I'm really having to watch myself, which is super hard.
That's the hardest part.
So that they become, independent and learn those skills.
Hey everybody, we want to take a quick break from this show to talk to you about the Copper Lodge Library. If you've heard more than one of our episodes, you may have heard us mention on a commercial break the Copper Lodge Library, but we haven't taken the time to tell you what this library is. Here you go. The Copper Lodge Library is a book series that preserves and presents timeless stories from the past to help families celebrate and cultivate virtues today. That is something that we definitely need.
Yeah, what's really cool about the Copper Lodge Library is that it offers a collection of stories that have built community throughout history, and it's presented in a beautiful series of books that the whole family can enjoy.
So now you and your family can build a culture by reading these stories together and having meaningful conversations about wisdom and virtue.
Yeah, it's so important to preserve excellent stories from the past that we can read today with our kids, no matter what ages they are. And the new books that were added to the Copper Lodge Library series most recently are Pride and Prejudice, The Secret Garden, and English Epic Poetry.
So if you want to find out more about the Copper Lodge Library, head on over to copperlodgelibrary.com. Let's get back to the show.
What about you, Delise? I know you've got little Leo who's I'm sure he wants to be so independent right now. It's that age, right? What are you doing at home to kind of help him learn those skills?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, my son is very goal-oriented, and goals just help me. But I do a couple of things. Number one, I try to really step back, and get that bird's eye view. What is this thing? When he's frustrated, what is the thing that he's actually trying to do? Because let's take, for example, this is something he's not struggling with, but if he was trying to open like a twist cap and having trouble with that, he's really not necessarily just struggling with the twisting. It might be strength, it might be fine motor skills, or a bunch of smaller things in that one big skill. So ever since he was little, I always would try to analyze it so that I could then create scenarios for him to practice those other skills at times that weren't as stressful, so that then when he needed to twist the cap open, he could do it, or he could practice it more effectively. And that's been really helpful, especially if you have a child, I wish I had multiple so I could make it more vague, but especially if you have a child like mine who's very hard on themselves. And I can be that way too. If I can't do something, I totally relate to what you're saying. If I can't do something, the reason I don't want to do it is I don't like failing publicly.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't want to be in that scenario because it makes me feel vulnerable.
Mhm.
And being vulnerable is not necessarily a bad thing, and failure is not necessarily a bad thing. But if I can create more scenarios essentially where he can practice, that's my way of helping him and helping him to become more independent, because usually he doesn't know that I'm helping him practice the other thing. I just rotated the toys, and it happens to be that the things that are out right now will not stack easily by themselves. So now you're practicing that fine motor balancing skill. So when you go outside and you're trying to do the other thing that I saw you really frustrated about, you can do it now, or you have a better way to approach it than you were approaching it before, because now you actually understand what's behind that skill. So that's been the case for riding the bike. It was like, okay, he wanted to practice pedaling. He wanted to practice on the strider. He got bored of those things because they were too easy. So then I got the bike, and then it was really frustrating, but I left the other ones out so he could keep practicing those skills until he was able to do it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like building those opportunities to learn when they at least think it was their idea.
Yeah.
And that gives them ownership, because I'm not suggesting, I'm just providing the tools that you need. And when you're ready, you'll go out and use those things. And then when I am suggesting, hey, let's come do this thing, at least you have the skills that you need to meet that goal, even if it's really hard still.
That's really good. I like how you go into like the individual skills for a task, because it makes me think of like if someone's really worried about debate. I mean, this is way far away in what challenge and stuff years or high school years, but what is it that they're scared of? Is it that they're going to be public speaking? Is it that they don't know how to make a grammatically correct sentence? Or is it that maybe they're just nervous to speak in public?
Right.
Is it the public speaking thing? And you can go in as the parent and see, oh, it could be this and could be this. Let me give them another way to practice that. Whether that's, if they're worried about public speaking, let's call grandma and read your paper in front of grandma. Or if it's the grammar skills that they're not sure of, how can we go back and remind ourselves, maybe making it a fun game or something like that without them even knowing, So I love that you brought that up. I didn't even think about that.
Well, that brings me to the next thing. How do you motivate your kids to learn?
That's a hard one. It's one that I'm still honestly trying to figure out, I think. So here's some things I've come up with that we have tried. For instance, copy work we're going to be doing this year at home, just because I know they can do copy work by themselves. I can give them a book and say, okay, here's what we're going to copy today. Go for it. And then they're, of course, getting spelling practice, handwriting practice, reading practice, grammar practice, all these things into one without me really having to do much except let's write this passage today. We have some prescript books where they get to practice cursive. That's, some history documents. Maybe it's a book that we're going to read together. And I just say, write the first paragraph on this page. Maybe it's the Constitution of the United States. Who knows? But I feel like that's a way that I can kind of get them to go do your copy work. Mommy's got to do the laundry, whatever it is, and get them to be a little bit more independent in it, but also give them guidance as well and let them know that I'm there. I also like the idea for me to be there and read to them while they're doing some of their work. They know that I'm there with them. They might hear my voice reading over them, kind of like a read aloud. And I'm fully plan to read aloud to them when they're like 17, by the way. But they're doing some other type of work. Maybe that's just creative play. Maybe that's painting a picture. Nothing that they have to think too much on, but that they're still being independent in what they're doing. They're coloring a picture, or maybe they're building something with blocks, or especially Lincoln. But they're able to do something themselves while I'm there with them. Also, I think checklists are wonderful.
Yeah.
I love a good paper checklist. So providing that for them every day. I'm so excited because I just found out Essentials comes with a checklist that the kids can check off. So I've like printed it out for Banks so that, okay, have you done your spelling word? Have you done your spelling rule? Have you done your vocab? Have you written your keyword outline? I'm excited about that. And I think checklists can be for all ages. I still give myself checklists to do for
So do I.
housework or work. Like I love the manual thing of checking something off, y'all. That is magical to just put a check mark there. I love it. And then again, I've already talked about it, but just to ask them questions to kind of hone in on that independence, because I think if they can figure the answer out themselves, it makes them excited. And maybe I ask an easy question on purpose so that they get that confidence that, oh, I can do this myself. I know this. I can do it, to give them that confidence to help motivate them to want to be a little bit more independent.
Mm-hmm.
So, Delise, do you think there's any disadvantages to trying to get your child to be more independent?
Yes.
I mean, we've already kind of talked about it, but
yeah, I've already sort of talked about it. And again, I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy here. No offense if your name is Nancy, but I do just want to make sure for myself, I'm trying to preach to my future self and my current self, as well as all of the moms listening. Independent learning doesn't mean that our children don't need us.
absolutely.
And I remember so many times, and I've said this on the show before, but I think it's worth saying again in this context. You know, I'm one of 4. There were usually 5 children being homeschooled in my household. And it was not uncommon for me to wake up in the middle of the night and to find my mother sitting on our couch studying my textbook. That's what it takes to be an excellent. And I'm not saying you have to get up in the middle of the night. I'm just saying you've got to apply yourself to your children's studies in order for them to study well. And that was when I was older, and you know, there were multiples of us. So she was doing high school at the same time that she was doing preschool. But I'm just saying we have to be honest with ourselves about what it's going to take for us to teach our children to become independent learners. And it's a personal investment for me just as much as it is for them. So when we're talking about disadvantages, I see if you don't have a good definition of that, that could be a disadvantage. Another one could just be not checking up on your kid, you know, letting the child, especially into the upper challenge years, you know, we do give them a lot of ownership in learning, and they should have that ownership. They're old enough to have it. But if your kid is telling their tutor that they've done work or that you said they didn't need to do work and you're not checking up on them, they could spend a whole semester not doing stuff and you won't find out for months. And that happens.
Yeah.
And I was even talking to another tutor today, and she was saying, you know, the kids in her class who say, or the kids in her class whose parents say, oh, Johnny's so great, he just goes off and does it by himself and he doesn't even need me. Those usually are the children who struggle. But the ones who are like, man, I just don't know if we're doing enough, and we go over it and we try, and I'm trying to help him to learn independence, those are the ones who do well. Because you're not designed to learn alone. And so while, yes, we're trying to equip our children with the tools and skills for learning, that doesn't mean that they receive those in a silo by themselves. So I would say that's a disadvantage. And then also, I touched on this briefly earlier, but with like the difference between traditional school and homeschooling affords you so many beautiful opportunities. And one of those beautiful opportunities is to go beyond the textbook. So if all you're doing every single time you learn, and I'm not saying you have to do it in every subject every time, I get that that's a lot, but if all you're ever doing is just reading about things, you're missing your shot. You can go out there and live that life. You know, geometry doesn't just have to happen on a piece of paper. And that's what makes things come alive. That's when you're really learning. That's what makes learning rewarding and helps your children to get excited about it, because then they're like, oh my gosh, if I learn this, then we can go do that other thing. You know, that's cool. And again, in that traditional classroom setting, your neighbor has a question. You didn't even realize you had that question. So they ask a question. You're like, oh. And then when you ask your question, you can build on the answer they just received. So if you don't give your child enough opportunities to learn alongside other people, they're going to miss that opportunity to let iron sharpen iron. So independence is good, but that's not the end all be all, I guess is my deal.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Yeah, no, I think you hit a lot of them on the head. We want them to be in group settings. We want them to be independent as far as, you know, defining it as taking ownership of what they know, but we don't want them to do it all by themselves. They need to be in community with other people so that they can get more curious about the world. Because when I talk to you, I'm like, I would have never thought about that myself. We don't know everything by ourselves. And I know you had a verse in Proverbs talking about that wisdom and understanding come from the Lord. And we need other people around us to help show us that as well.
Mhm.
We need to be self-directed to get into the word, to learn those words. But independence doesn't mean everything's alone. And I think that's kind of like, bam, the key right here.
Yeah.
And I think too, you were talking about getting kids excited about it. And I think if you are a parent that maybe just kind of goes away and lets them do their own thing, they're not going to be as excited to learn new things. And that's really important for us, I think, too, is to be invested in them, because when they see us getting excited about whatever it is they're learning, they're going to get more excited to learn something. And the beauty in that, I think, is just unfathomable.
100%.
Yeah, and it made me think of that quote too, that it's an old saying. If you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. But if you teach him how to fish, he can, eat for a lifetime. And that's really, I think, what we're trying to do here and talking about. We're trying to give them the skills so that when they do go out in the world trying to fend for themselves, to learn for themselves, they have those skills that they need. And they know they can come back to us if they need it. They don't have to do it alone, but they can do it self-directed.
Yeah, I love it. Well, guys, I hope that you all enjoyed this conversation. I hope it caused you to think and also encouraged you. We have such a beautiful opportunity in being parents and being able to have that first front row seat to their lives, to their learning. And then even being able to carry on a legacy, pass on the things that we know to another generation and to their children's children. I still think about things that I know that my great-grandmother said or did, and that's a gift that we can give our children. And so we want to leave you with that. Just a reminder that what you have to steward might be large and daunting. It's going to take a lot out of you, but it's so life-giving and so worth it. And it's truly an honor. Children are a gift from the Lord, and it is an honor to be a parent. And so we just want to commission you to run into that with faith and humility. And so if you enjoyed this episode, we would love for you to let us know by leaving a review. 5 stars are always appreciated. And we'd also love to hear from you over on social media.
Yeah, you guys can find us over on Instagram at Blessings and Motherhood. We continue the conversation over there. We love to hear from you guys, your thoughts about the episode. We usually post different quotes from the episode, and we'd really love your insights. So see us over there, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.